Nia Baptiste thought she was just giving a ham sandwich to a homeless stranger named Earl. She didn't know that the man shivering against the brick wall was actually Richard Westbrook, the missing father of one of the richest men in America. And she certainly didn't know that getting fired for feeding him would lead to a knock on her door that would change her life forever. Before we dive back into this amazing story, I want to take a second to welcome you to the family. If you love heartfelt videos like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. I also love seeing how far these stories travel. So tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? I read through them, and it's incredible to see us all connected from around the world. All right, let's get back to Nia. Nia Baptiste was 19 years old and already exhausted by life. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day, though she had plenty of those, but the deep, bone-settling exhaustion that comes from carrying weight no teenager should have to bear. She worked 6 days a week at Le Jardin Blanc, an upscale French restaurant in downtown Philadelphia that catered to people who spent more on a single entree than Nia made in 3 shifts. Her job was simple: serve the food, smile politely, don't speak unless spoken to, and pretend she didn't notice when customers snapped their fingers at her like she was invisible. She was good at it. She'd learned early that survival meant swallowing pride and keeping your head down. The money was terrible. Tips were unpredictable. Most nights, she walked home with maybe $40 in her apron, which had to stretch to cover rent for the cramped studio apartment she shared with her younger brother, groceries, bus fare, and whatever emergencies life decided to throw at her that week. She was always one bad shift away from disaster. But she never complained. Complaining didn't pay bills. It was a Thursday evening in late September when Nia first saw him. She'd just finished a double shift, lunch and dinner service back to back, and her feet ached so badly she could barely feel them anymore. The restaurant was only 3 blocks from her apartment, so she always walked, even when it was late. Saving $2 on bus fare meant she could buy bread and eggs for the week. She was halfway home, passing the old shuttered newsstand on Chestnut Street, when she saw the man sitting against the brick wall. He was older, maybe 60, maybe 70, it was hard to tell, with a gray beard that reached his chest and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. His eyes were closed, his head resting against the wall, and he looked forgotten, like the city had erased him. Nia slowed. She'd passed dozens of homeless people on her way to and from work. Philadelphia was full of them. Most people walked by without looking. Some dropped change. A few gave food. Nia usually didn't have anything to give. But something about this man stopped her. Maybe it was the way he sat so still, like he'd given up waiting for the world to notice him. Maybe it was the look on his face, not angry, not desperate, just empty. Or maybe it was the fact that she knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. She walked over and crouched down a few feet away. "Hey, you okay?" The man's eyes opened slowly. They were pale blue, clouded but not unkind. He looked at her like he wasn't sure she was real. "I'm fine," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a while. "You need anything? Water? Food?" He shook his head. "I'm fine." Nia glanced down at the paper bag she was holding. Her own dinner, a half sandwich and fruit cup she'd snagged from the restaurant kitchen before leaving. Chef Maurice usually let her take leftovers if there were any. Tonight, there weren't many. She hesitated. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. But looking at this man, sitting alone in the dark with nothing, she couldn't walk away. "Here." She held out the bag. "Take it." The man stared at the bag like it was a foreign object. "You don't have to." "I know," Nia said. "But I want to." He took it slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you." Nia stood. "What's your name?" He paused, like he had to think about it. "Earl." "I'm Nia." She smiled. "I work at the restaurant down the street. If I see you around, I'll bring you something, okay?" Earl's eyes filled with something Nia couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe. Or disbelief that someone had actually stopped. "Okay," he whispered. Nia walked home that night with an empty stomach, but a strange warmth in her chest. She didn't know why she'd stopped. Didn't know why this man, out of all the people she'd passed, had mattered. But he did. And that was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Nia made it a routine. Every morning before her shift, she'd make an extra sandwich or pack some fruit, and she'd stop by the newsstand to give it to Earl. At first, he barely spoke. But slowly, he started opening up. He told her about the weather, about the birds he watched in the mornings, about how most people looked right through him, like he was a ghost. You're the only one who stops, he said one day. Nia shrugged. People are busy. Not too busy to see, Earl said quietly. They just don't want to. Nia didn't have an answer for that. She knew he was right. After her evening shifts, she'd stop by again, bringing him whatever she could, leftover bread, soup, sometimes just a bottle of water. It wasn't much, but Earl never complained. He always said thank you. Always looked at her like she'd given him the world. Nia's coworkers noticed. One of the servers, a girl named Simone, asked her about it one day in the break room. You're the one feeding that homeless guy on Chestnut, right? Nia nodded, tying her apron. Yeah. Why? Simone lowered her voice. Be careful. Monsieur Dupont sees you, he's gonna lose it. You know how he is about the image of the restaurant. Monsieur Alain Dupont was the general manager of Le Jardin Blanc. He was French, or at least pretended to be, with slick-back hair, tailored suits, and an accent that got thicker whenever wealthy customers were around. He ran the restaurant like a military operation, strict, cold, and completely intolerant of anything that didn't fit his vision of excellence. Nia had avoided him as much as possible, but she knew Simone was right. If Dupont found out she was associating with a homeless man near the restaurant, he'd see it as a stain on the brand. I'll be careful, Nia said. But she wasn't careful enough. It was a Friday night, one of the busiest of the month. The restaurant was packed with businessmen, couples celebrating anniversaries, tourists who'd read about Le Jardin Blanc in a travel magazine. Nia was running between tables, balancing trays, refilling wine glasses, trying to keep up. She'd just finished serving a table when Dupont appeared beside her, his face tight with barely concealed fury. Mademoiselle Baptiste. A word. Now. Nia's stomach dropped. She followed him into the back hallway, away from the dining room. Dupont turned on her, his eyes cold. I have been told, he said slowly, that you have been feeding vagrants outside this establishment. Nia's heart pounded. I bring food to someone on my way home. It's not. It is unacceptable. Dupont's voice rose. Do you understand what this restaurant represents? We are not a charity. We are a 5-star establishment. And you are bringing rats to our doorstep. He's not a rat, Nia said quietly. He's a person. He is a homeless man. Dupont hissed. And you are making us look like a soup kitchen. This ends now. You are fired. The words hit Nia like a physical blow. What? You heard me. Collect your things. Leave. But I need this job. I can't. You should have thought of that before you embarrassed this restaurant. Dupont turned and walked away, leaving Nia standing alone in the hallway, her vision blurring with tears. She didn't remember gathering her things. Didn't remember walking out the back door. But suddenly she was on the street, the cool night air hitting her face, and the reality of what had just happened crashed over her. She'd lost her job. She had $127 in her bank account. Rent was due in 8 days. And she had no idea how she was going to survive. She walked to the newsstand on autopilot. Earl was there, sitting in his usual spot, wrapped in a thin blanket. He looked up when he saw her. Nia, what's wrong? She sat down beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. I lost my job. Earl's face fell. Because of me? Nia nodded, wiping her eyes. My boss found out I was bringing you food. He said it was bad for the restaurant's image. I'm so sorry. Earl's voice cracked. I never wanted. It's not your fault, Nia said quickly. I chose to help you. I'd do it again. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Earl spoke. You're a good person, Nia. The world doesn't deserve people like you. Nia smiled weakly. I don't feel very good right now. You are, Earl said. And one day, someone's going to see that. I promise. Nia didn't believe him, but she appreciated the words anyway. What neither of them knew was that across the country, in a glass tower in Manhattan, a man was about to see something that would change all of their lives forever. Julian Westbrook was 34 years old and one of the wealthiest men in America. He'd inherited Westbrook Industries from his grandfather, an empire built on real estate, tech investments, and pharmaceutical patents, and had tripled its value in less than a decade. Forbes called him a visionary. Business Insider called him ruthless. His competitors called him untouchable. But Julian would have traded every dollar, every property, every deal, to get back the one thing money couldn't buy, his father. 3 years ago, his father had disappeared. It had been 6 months after Julian's mother died in a car accident, a tragedy that shattered their family. His father had never recovered. He'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped talking, And then one morning, he'd walked out of their estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, with no wallet, no phone, no ID, and vanished. Julian had spent millions searching. Private investigators, billboards, databases, nothing. It was like his father had ceased to exist. Until tonight. Julian was in his Manhattan penthouse, half watching the news while reviewing acquisition reports, when a commercial came on. It was an ad for a new luxury restaurant in Philadelphia, Le Jardin Blanc. The camera panned across elegant tables, crystal chandeliers, impeccably dressed waitstaff. And then, for just 3 seconds, the camera swept past the front window. Outside, barely visible in the background, was a man sitting on the sidewalk. Julian's heart stopped. He rewound the footage, played it again, paused it. The man had a gray beard, weathered face, pale blue eyes that looked exactly like the ones Julian saw in old family photos. "Dad," Julian whispered. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and called his head of security. "I need a jet ready in 30 minutes. Destination, Philadelphia. And I need every detail you can find on a restaurant called Le Jardin Blanc." 20 minutes later, Julian was in the air. He landed at a private airstrip outside Philadelphia at 6:47 a.m. A car was waiting. Julian didn't sleep, didn't eat. He just stared out the window as the city woke up around him, his mind racing. What if it wasn't him? What if it was just someone who looked like his father? What if he'd spent 3 years chasing ghosts, and this was just another dead end? But what if it was him? The car pulled up in front of Le Jardin Blanc just after 8 a.m. The restaurant wasn't open yet, but Julian didn't care. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and looked around. And then he saw him. Sitting against the wall of an old newsstand, wrapped in a blanket, was a man who looked exactly like the ghost that had haunted Julian's dreams for 3 years. Julian's legs almost gave out. He walked forward slowly, each step feeling like it might shatter the fragile hope building in his chest. "Excuse me," Julian said softly, his voice trembling. The man looked up. His eyes were cloudy, confused, lined with years of pain and exhaustion. Julian knelt down in front of him, tears already blurring his vision. He pulled out his phone and opened his photo gallery, pictures of his family, his mother, his father, the 3 of them together. "Please," Julian whispered, "look at this. Do you recognize anyone?" The man stared at the phone screen. His eyes moved slowly across the images. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then his breathing changed, became faster, shallower. His hand reached out, trembling, and touched the screen where a photo showed a younger version of himself standing beside a woman and a teenage boy. His voice cracked. His eyes filled with tears. I know this." Julian's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. "Who are they? Do you remember?" The man's face contorted with the effort of reaching through fog and darkness. His fingers pressed against the image of the boy. "Julian," he whispered. Then louder, with growing certainty. "Julian, my son. You're my son." Tears streamed down Julian's face. Yes, I'm your son." The man looked from the phone to Julian's face, back and forth, the resemblance undeniable. And then something broke open inside him. 3 years of emptiness, confusion, and lost identity came flooding back all at once. His hands flew to his head, gripping his hair as memories crashed through him like a tidal wave. Oh God, I remember. I'm Richard Westbrook. That's my name. That's who I am." "Yes," Julian sobbed, pulling his father into his arms. "You're Richard Westbrook. You're my father. I've been looking for you for 3 years." Richard clung to his son, his whole body shaking. "Your mother, she died. The accident. I couldn't survive it. Everything went black. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember how I got here. I forgot everything. I forgot my own name." "It's okay," Julian whispered, holding his father tighter. "You're safe now. I've got you. I'm never letting you go again." They stayed like that for several minutes, both crying, both trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Julian pulled back and looked at his father. "We need to get you to a hospital. Get you checked out. Get you home." Richard nodded, but then panic flashed across his face. "Wait. No. I can't leave yet." Julian frowned. "What?" "Dad, you need medical attention." "There's a girl," Richard said urgently, gripping Julian's arms. "Nia. She's been helping me. She brought me food every single day. She talked to me when everyone else looked through me like I was invisible. She made me feel human when I didn't even remember I was human. Julian's eyes widened. Someone's been helping you? She lost her job because of me, Richard continued, his voice breaking. Her boss found out she was feeding me and he fired her. She had nothing, Julian. Nothing. But she gave me everything. I can't just leave without making sure she's okay. I won't. Julian looked at his father. This man who'd been lost for 3 years, who'd lived on the streets with no memory of his former life, and yet had formed a bond with someone who showed him kindness when he needed it most. Okay, Julian said firmly. We'll find her. I promise you we'll find her. It took Julian's security team exactly 93 minutes. They pulled employment records from Le Jardin Blanc, traced Nia's last known address, confirmed it was current. By 11 a.m., Julian and Richard were standing outside a rundown apartment building in North Philadelphia. Julian knocked on the door of apartment 3C. Footsteps shuffled inside. The door opened a crack, the chain still on. Nia's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exhausted, defeated. Then her eyes landed on Earl. No, Richard. And her mouth fell open. Earl. Her voice was barely a whisper. What are you? How did you find me? Her gaze shifted to Julian. The expensive suit, the polished shoes, the aura of wealth that radiated from him like heat. Confusion filled her face. What's going on? Richard stepped forward, his eyes filled with emotion. Nia, I need to tell you something. Something I just remembered this morning. Julian spoke next, his voice gentle. My name is Julian Westbrook. And the man you've been helping, his real name is Richard Westbrook. He's my father. Nia's hand flew to her mouth. 3 years ago, after my mother died, my father had a mental break, Julian continued. He walked out of our home with no memory of who he was. We searched everywhere. Spent millions trying to find him. And all this time, he was here. Richard's voice cracked as he spoke. I didn't remember my own name until Julian found me this morning. He showed me pictures, and everything came flooding back. Who I was, who I am, the life I had. But even before I remembered any of that, there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. He looked at Nia with tears streaming down his face. You saved my life. When I was nobody, when I had nothing, not even my own identity, you saw me. You fed me. You talked to me. You made me feel like I mattered. Nia's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't walk past you. You looked so alone. I was alone, Richard said. Completely and utterly alone. Until you. Julian pulled an envelope from his jacket. You lost your job because you chose kindness. Because you saw a human being instead of a problem. My father is alive today because of you. And I can never truly repay what you did. But I want to try. He handed her the envelope. Nia's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a check. $500,000. She gasped, nearly dropping it. I can't. This is too much. I didn't do it for money. I know, Julian said softly. That's exactly why you deserve it. There's more, Richard added, his voice stronger now that his memory had returned. Julian is offering you a full scholarship to any university you choose. Housing while you study. A job at Westbrook Industries if you want it. Whatever you need to build the future you deserve. Nia shook her head, tears streaming freely now. I don't understand. I just brought you sandwiches. I didn't do anything special. You did everything, Richard said, his voice breaking again. You gave me dignity when the world had stripped it away. You reminded me, even when I didn't know who I was, that kindness still existed, that I was worth someone's time. Julian's voice was thick with emotion. You didn't just feed a homeless man, Nia. You saved my father. You brought him back to me. And our family will be forever grateful. Nia couldn't hold it together anymore. She broke down completely, and Richard stepped forward and pulled her into a gentle embrace. Julian wrapped his arms around both of them. 3 people. 3 lives forever changed. All because one 19-year-old girl refused to look away. 6 months later, Nia stood on the campus of Temple University, enrolled full-time in the School of Social Work. She'd moved into a beautiful apartment, paid for by the Westbrooks. And for the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about rent or groceries or choosing between bills and survival. Richard had fully recovered physically and was living with Julian in Connecticut, seeing a therapist twice a week to process the trauma of his 3 lost years. His memory was intact now, though some details remained foggy. But he remembered the important things. He remembered his son, his late wife, his life, and he remembered Nia. Every month, Julian flew Nia to New York to have dinner with them. Because she wasn't just the girl who'd helped Richard when he had nothing. She was family. In Julian's office, hanging on the wall behind his desk, was a framed photo. Nia, Richard, and Julian standing together on that Philadelphia sidewalk where everything changed. Underneath it, a small plaque read, "Kindness sees what others miss." Because sometimes, one act of compassion doesn't just save one life. It saves three. And sometimes, the smallest gestures echo the loudest. Kindness doesn't need applause. It doesn't need recognition. It simply shows up day after day, expecting nothing in return. And sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe finds a way to honor that kindness in ways we never could have imagined. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you, you never know whose life you're changing. Be kind anyway. If this story moved you, don't just watch and leave. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to believe in goodness today. Drop a comment and tell us about a time you helped a stranger, or a stranger helped you. Let's build a community that chooses kindness. Every single time.